Tonight's story. It's one of those that just sticks with you. No jump scares, no fake drama. Just something real that crawls under your skin the longer you think about it. You'll know what I mean once it starts. So grab a seat, clear your head, and listen close. This one's different. All right, let's get into it. The river I'm thinking about isn't famous for anything. It's just a long, patient ribbon that runs behind a field where the grass grows too high in summer. I used to go there because the water sounded like it knew what to do without me. When I walked down the narrow path, the air cooled and smelled of wet bark and crushed weeds. Stones along the bank held the day's heat, and when I sat, it felt like the kind of seat someone else had warmed and left for me. I'd settle my gear the way I always did, quietly, almost politely, and listen for the steady slide of water around the bigger rocks. That night started like any other night out there. A slow breath, a body unwinding, the kind of stillness you only notice when your thoughts stop fidgeting. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't trying to prove anything. The river accepted me the way a quiet room does, the kind where you can hear your own shoes when you shift your feet. Looking back, the only unusual thing at the beginning was how complete the calm felt, like the quiet had weight and was happy to sit on my shoulders. I remember the first sound from across the water arriving as lightly as a moth. A small plop not far from where the far bank curves in. If you've spent time near water, you know the difference between a random gurgle and a line breaking the surface. This was the second thing. Not loud, not urgent, just the quick mouth of the river closing around a sinker. Then the slow pull of line and the soft suck of mud giving way under a boot. It felt ordinary, even companionable. I pictured someone out there not wanting company, just working the same river with the same patience. I waited to see a lantern or hear a cough. Nothing came, just that steady rhythm. Cast, a small splash, the faint creak of a tackle box lid, then the wet whisper of a step. It was strangely reassuring, like being in a library and hearing a page turn a few shelves away. I told myself I wasn't alone, and somehow that helped the mind settle. But the more I listened, the more precise the sounds became, as if the water had moved closer to carry them to me. I called out once, nothing big, just a simple greeting tossed across like a flat stone, expecting it to skip along the surface and vanish. My voice didn't carry the way I thought it would. It went out and thinned in the open air, as if the trees on the other side took it into their needles and kept it. No answer. That was fine. People come to the river to be left alone. I turned my attention back to my line, pretended I was entirely focused on the drift, but my body had already tilted toward that opposite bank. I started noticing small patterns, how the sound of the cast would be followed by that same tiny tug of mud, and then a pause, as if he were waiting with me, counting the river's slow heartbeats. I watched for a silhouette, the glint of metal, any proof of a person. I kept not seeing it. You know how sometimes a shape is more convincing because you can almost, but not quite, make it out. The dark did that trick. I told myself it was someone I knew from the village, an old hand keeping to himself. I told myself the distance was playing games with my eyes. There was a moment, I can't pinpoint why, when curiosity became a small decision in the body. It felt like loosening a knot. I thought, I'll go up to the crossing, step over, wave, set us both at ease. I clipped my rod where I always do, a branch that holds things without argument, and eased to my feet. The air had cooled. The cool settled in the sleeves and across the back of my neck. That clean river chill that rinses out your head. Gravel answered under my boots in soft answers, and plants brushed my legs with that papery sound dry leaves make even when they're wet. The farther I walked, the more aware I became of my own noise, the way a person becomes aware of their breath in a chapel. The other side went quiet. No cast, no shift of mud, just my steps and the river's steady talking. I told myself he'd paused to adjust something, or he'd heard me coming and didn't want conversation. I told myself a lot of reasonable things, and each one took the edge off until I realized that the quiet wasn't restful anymore. It had the posture of someone standing still and watching. The crossing is just a set of firm stones and a plank laid where the river narrows. I took it slow, not out of fear, just habit. On the far bank, the ground holds a different kind of damp, more soil than sand, with grass that grows in thick ropes. I stepped down into it and felt the weight of the place rise through my boots. The first thing I checked was the mud. If someone had been working the bank, there would be prints. A heel, a toe, the twitchy signature of a dragged line. Nothing. I scuffed the surface with my foot and found only the soft gloss of untouched silt. It felt like arriving in a room where you were sure you'd hear laughter, but found the chair still tucked under the table. I crouched and let my hand hover over the water, close enough to feel the river's cool breath. No ripples that weren't mine. I waited for a late sound, some afterthought of activity, the tick of metal, the hush of a step, only the broad, even voice of the current. That was when embarrassment flickered through me, quick and warm. I talked myself into certainty. Certainty had led me here. The ground didn't know my name. I told myself the person had simply moved on. Maybe he'd threaded back into the trees the moment he heard me stand, the way shy animals step away without fuss. I pictured him folding his line carefully, picking his path between roots, making the sensible choice to leave a stranger be. That story was almost enough, until I noticed that the night had thinned out the smaller sounds I expect. The small insect buzz, the dry leaf chatter, the easy talk of grasses rubbing stems. The silence was still, yes, but not empty. It had weight to it, as if the space around me had filled with something that doesn't make noise. The smell of the bank sharpened, wet earth and a dull metallic edge, the scent that sometimes rises when the river pulls at buried stones. My own pulse stepped in to fill the space the insects left behind thick in my ears. I took a slow breath because a quick one would have sounded like a decision. The trees across the water looked closer than they were, as if the dark had tidied the distance. I told myself I'd lingered long enough. The story about the man leaving would be true if I let it be. I started back with the kind of care people mistake for confidence. Not rushed, not even brisk, just steady, like carrying a bowl of water you don't want to spill. Every step made its own small ceremony. The press of boot to soil, the lift, the breath that matched it. I kept my gaze on the crossing and let my ears do what they wanted. Behind me, the bank stayed what it was, quiet, patient, unhelpful. The river, loyal as ever, moved where it always moves, said what it always says. I didn't look over my shoulder, not because I was afraid of what I might see, but because I didn't want to discover an explanation that was smaller than the feeling. Halfway across, something in me uncoiled, a thin wire easing in the chest. The air on my original side felt different, warmer by a degree, softer at the edges, like stepping from shade into a room that has been lived in. When I put my foot down on my bank again, the insects remembered their work. A cricket tested a note. A reed rattled. The night breathed out. I stood there longer than necessary, pretending to check knots. giving my hands something to do while the rest of me settled. I packed up without rushing, the way you fold a shirt you plan to wear again soon. The river kept its counsel, and I let mine drift. I didn't tell anyone the next day. It didn't feel like a story worth defending. What would I even say? I heard a fisherman who left no sign of himself, and when I went looking, the quiet felt like a person. That's not an accusation. It's not a mystery either, at least not the kind that asks to be solved. I've been back to that water since, and I still like it there. I still find the same peace settling into the same curve of bank. I just don't cross to that side. I leave it the way you leave a chair empty for someone you think might come late. Sometimes I catch myself listening for the simple, believable noises that started this whole thing. The soft plop, the careful step, the small work sounds of a person minding their own business. It would almost be a relief to hear them again, to point and say, "See? It was just a man, but the river keeps its balance. It gives me what I can hold." And I still wonder whose place I stood in that night, and which side of the water was mine.